Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Two World Podcast. I'm one of the co-hosts, Jacob Dotson, and I'm very happy today to share with you that we have a special guest, and I'll let him share his name.
Okay, it's Ron Martin.
And we're so excited to have Ron Martin on because he has a really interesting experience to share with us about service abroad with PAX. But also, in addition to that, he is Barney's father, my other co-host. And so we're so delighted to have him present for our discussion today. And I want to turn things over to Barney, maybe to get us started with an opening question.
Yeah, one of the themes that we've noticed during our podcast is kind of travel and service and kind of experiencing new experiences that we have had while traveling. I know many stories that you have had from Brazil, but and even training that you had at the beginning of your time at Brazil. But to be honest, I don't know the exact specific details of how you got to Brazil in the first place. How was it that you decided or ended up there?
Okay. Well, during that time, I guess in 1964, that's when the Vietnam War was going on. And I'd always wanted to do some kind of service. And I kind of wanted, I guess I'm a adventurous person, so I thought I'd like to do something out of the country. So I contacted MCC and said, I'd like to volunteer. I kind of felt like, when I was at Purdue University, as during that time, I was getting ready to graduate with my BS degree in agriculture. And a lot of the young people were, especially in my dorm, would kept questioning me why I was a conscientious objector because, they didn't have that neat thing, and they were being called up to go to Vietnam, or at least they thought they might be. So I kind of felt as alternate service. This was my way of serving. I could serve God versus serving man, in a way of doing good rather than doing, going to battle and fighting. So that was part of my reason. And so I contacted MCC and they said, well, they had an opening in Bolivia that they would fit me well. There's a project there that they were working on. It's been going for several years. And so I thought, well, I'll be learning Spanish. And week before I was supposed to go, I was finished up my coursework of that summer, which I had to get another course in. And so I graduated in August. In September 1, I went to Akron, Pennsylvania, and a week later I was in Brazil. So I didn't get much to enjoy my graduation, but anyhow. So they called me about a week before I was supposed to go to Bolivia, and they said, they can use me more in Brazil because they're opening a project there. And it was up in the middle of the jungle. They had just opened up the Brazil-Belém highway. That was a new road that went from there all the way up to Belém. So, basically this project that we were going to be assigned to was started by the Presbyterian Church. And it was a colony is what it was. And they had invited a bunch of, well, I shouldn't say a bunch, but there was 15 families that moved from the dry Northeast. And they walked all the way across, which is probably about 3,000 miles. The first year they came to one point there in the middle of the jungle and they cleared it a little bit, planted their crops, and then the birds ate most of their corn and stuff. And so they kept walking till they could get to this colony. And the way it was that each family was given about 100 acres of land in this colony. And with the agreement that they would have to clear 5 acres per year to keep the use of the land. And after 10 years of whatever it was, then they would be given the land as theirs. But in Brazil, most all the land is owned by the government. So basically you never own anything as far as land, except maybe in the cities and stuff you do. So you never can sell your land. And if someone wants to come along and if you have too much land, and they may try to squat on your land, but you can sometimes get them off. But anyhow, that was what it was. It was started by the Presbyterian Church. And so they thought that since I had an agriculture degree, that I could serve better by learning, developing this area and finding out what would grow in this area. So that was what I was sent for. There were 4 of us PAX people, another young fellow from Illinois, And then a married couple from, they were from Kansas, Newton, Kansas, and she had gotten a degree in home economics and he in accounting. So they sent us 4 people there, and we were there first. Before we got to the colony, we had a 6-month language training in Campinas, which is down in the southern part of, well, it's not the southern part, but it's kind of the central part in the city of Campinas, which is about 45 miles from São Paulo, which is about, at that time, had like 10 million people there. And Campinas is a city of about 100,000. But there was a language school there that was started by the Presbyterians to train missionaries. And so we were sent there. MCC had us go there for language training. And Ed, the other young fella, and I lived in a Presbyterian dormitory. We each had a room in the dormitory there with all these young men that wanted to be pastors and stuff. So it was a very interesting situation for us. So, they wanted to learn English from us, and we wanted to learn Portuguese. Rather than being in Spanish, it was Portuguese in Brazil. So that's kind of how we got started. The missionaries there in the school were mostly Southern Baptist, Nazarene, Methodist. Anybody that wanted to serve in the country was supposed to have some language training before they were sent out. And so this was what that was. So that's how I got to Brazil. And I really want to go on and talk about the colony a little bit more as far as what we did up there. But I did want to say something about the language training, because we were given the language training, and the fact is that for the first month, we never saw how it was written. We just had one-on-one teachers with us, and they would work with us, and we speak English at a certain level, and Portuguese is spoken much, much faster. So that we had to learn all these many, like 10 different sentences, and we were timed, and we had to speak within the time level before we could move on into the next section of what we were supposed to learn. So, yeah.
Were you pretty content when you got your assignment? Did you feel excited about that particular location when you heard what it would be?
Yeah, I did. I felt like it was something that I could do that, at that point, I really didn't know what was expected of me, but I was pretty excited about it. Yeah. Learning some new territory, and we didn't know a lot about the colony we were going to be serving in. It was up in the northern part of Brazil, and people there in Campinas, where we were having our language training, said, well, that's the end of the world. You're going up there. He said, there's nobody up there. And basically there aren't the town that we moved to up there had like 25 people in it. And so the first while we lived in a mud hut, well, not a mud hut, it was a kind of a house, but it was like 2 rooms. And the houses up there are made out of mud with bamboo, in between, the slats and stuff. And then they pack mud in it. And then you have thatched roofs. So when we first moved there, we didn't know too much, but we had mosquito netting, and most of the mosquito netting was to keep the rat droppings off of us, not so much the mosquitoes. So we would sit in there sometimes and shoot mice out of this thatch with our guns. And a lot of the people there in that section would have boa constrictors. They would put a snake up in their roof, and that would kill the mice, would keep the mice out of their house that way. So at first, it didn't sound too appealing, but we've soon found out that these boa constrictors they're not dangerous. So,
so this colony was started by native Brazilians?
No, it started by the Presbyterian Church. They had a Presbyterian missionary that would come there like once a week, and they had built a small church there. But they did have a native pastor that was pastor there. And the church probably held, there was probably about, in the colony there, most everybody went to that church, as far as that, but, they were all Christian people. And so it probably held maybe 30 people. It was just a 1-room stucco type church. So yeah, he was his native pastor, and the thing, one of the sermons after I learned enough of the language, it was on building a bigger barn. That section out of the Bible that talks about how that that we don't build bigger barns. We try to do service with other people, and I found the people extremely, extremely welcoming, but we first moved into the area we went into about 45 miles from where we lived was a town of Imperatrice. And they had a great big sign up there, Yankees go home. We don't want you here. And they had the opinion that we were coming there to buy or to steal their wood and lumber and stuff, because there's a lot of mahogany trees and this kind of trees, but once we got there and they found out that we were there to serve them, which they couldn't understand, because the only view they had of Americans was the movie Dallas, the TV program Dallas, where you have everybody has big houses and you have big land and you have money going out your ears and stuff like that. So they couldn't understand how we would leave our big houses and come down there to serve them. But go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about how you experienced that change in them, that they went from maybe being cautious or skeptical to embracing you and welcoming you? What were the types of things that helped make a difference in that relationship, that helped them trust you, that helped build trust?
Yeah. Well, the one thing is, the roads down there are all mud roads, or, they're just roads or paths, really, basically. And we had a stake bed truck, and we would take people go along this road, and as we went down the road, into Imperatrice, because you had to go to Imperatrice to buy groceries and this kind of thing. That's about the only place you could go, because there was no grocery stores like what we have here. And so we would pick up people, they would wave and you'd pick them up and you would take them in. So we'd have by the time we got into Imperatrice, we would have a whole load of people in the back of our truck. And I think, that when you tell them what you were doing and that you were there not to take from them or to, steal them blind, why, then they began to see, we were there as honest people and to serve them. And two of the people that were there also were from the Mennonite Colony down in Curitiba. And so the one lady was a nurse, and her partner the other lady was a younger lady, was a nurse's aide or whatever. So I would drive them around a lot in the community there when people needed help on my little tractor, and I would we didn't have a car then, and we had tractors. So I would take these nurses out to the homes and stuff in the tractor. And so, it was a thing that we just felt we were living like they lived, I guess. And fortunately, the leader of the program insisted that we speak only Portuguese, even to our fellow Americans. He says, when you talk to someone and they cannot understand you, they think they're talking about you. So he insisted that we learn Portuguese and we speak only Portuguese to our fellow American workers there. So I almost got to the point by the time I got home that I forgot my English, rather than because we didn't speak English. So at first I carried a little dictionary around in order, because I got the basics, but as far as all the words and stuff like that I had to carry a dictionary to figure out what they were talking about. And that was really the fastest way to learn the language, is to make sure that they were honest with you. And they told you how to pronounce the word, versus, we always wanted to give an English accent to it, but, they helped us out learning that, if you speak the language, if you're going to understand it, you have to understand the person. And because of the way we learned the language, by not seeing it, we were not influenced by it. And a lot of people said we spoke better English or better Portuguese than most English people or missionaries there, or other people that were business people that came to Brazil and maybe were there for years and stuff. And still, they still had that American accent to their Portuguese. So
that's so interesting.
What were some of the maybe once you were able to kind of get settled and start to build a sense of community with the people there, what were some of the other challenges? Because I get the feeling that maybe it was a very good fit for you. Maybe they didn't have a good sense of good farming techniques or things like that. And um, were you able to help them in that way? And were there other challenges that maybe you faced in terms of your work, or in terms of maybe still feeling like like you're still maybe kind of a little bit separate from the community, like maybe still feeling kind of like a longing for, were you homesick or anything like that? Did you run into anything like that, or?
Well, I think at first I probably was a little bit, but at that point I think I was ready and willing to take on a new exciting adventure is what it amounted to for me anyhow. It's something new, something different. And I felt like, when I especially got up there in the colony, that the need of the people was so great. Their average income was $300 a year. That was their average income. And so part of my job, my main job was, when I first got there, I was told to start a garden. And so I did that. It was about a 2-acre garden. And I, it got seed from anywhere I could get seed of any vegetable, any crop like that, and would grow them just to see what would do. And of course, where we were at there, it's very sandy, and everybody lives right down by the stream, by the water, because they had to carry all their water for the home use. They didn't have running water, they didn't have electricity. Everything was well, first we didn't either. So we, used kerosene lamps and this kind of thing, and propane lights for light, and you took your bath in the stream and everything else, and this kind of thing. But so really, their meal was rice and beans, and in the morning they would have, they would have coffee and maybe a roll of bread or whatever it is, or something that they baked like that. But then for noon and for the evening meal, it was always just rice and beans. And the tomatoes they had were small tomatoes about the size of your thumb. So I had gone into an experiment station up in Baleen, which is like 300 miles away, and I brought back different varieties of rice, hybrid seed corn, because they only grew open pollinated corn. And I brought back a bunch of different kind of starts of oranges and this kind of thing to see what I could grow, because no one knew what would grow in that area as far as in east. And we also started a bunch of pepper plants, not pepper that you green pepper, but the black pepper, and to see what was there. And also a lot of different kind of palm trees and this kind of thing, because palm trees did real well there. And that's where they got their lumber from, and not in lumber, I guess, because most all the house, but also a lot of bamboo. But my job was to start this garden. And so at first I started out the garden, and I just gave anybody that came in, free food. Basically I just, cabbage and lettuce and tomatoes. I got seed of tomatoes. There was a Japanese variety that was a larger tomato. And we try to, use different kind of. Fortunately, the other lady that was with us was home ec, so she taught once a week. She'd have home ec classes with the women there. And so the first year I gave out, free food anytime that they came down there to my garden. The women would come about every day. They would come for something different, Well, I couldn't figure out why I was giving away so much cabbage, because I had a lot of cabbage. And I thought, well, how can I eat all this cabbage? Well, so I decided to figure out why this was, and I figured out that they were taking it home and feeding it to their pigs, because they had this idea that cabbage was not good for you. I don't know where they got that from, but they're very superstitious people, But anyhow, so then I started, we cleared about 20-acre field there that was in jungle. I had hired like 100 men. You tell them there's a job, and you would get people coming from 100 miles away or more that they would walk there, or get a truck ride, and they would find out there was work. And so they would come. And so I had like 100 guys there, and we cleared off about 20 acres of trees and underbrush and this kind of thing, so I could have an experiment station up there. And so what I did is I had like 20 different varieties of rice that I grew out to see which one would do best for their area, and also beans and this kind of thing. Anything that I could felt like, would benefit them. Soybeans, even I tried to bring some soybeans, but it was the wrong day length up there where we were. So they didn't do well, but they got real bushy. But the people got very excited about these soybeans because they knew that they were high protein, and it was something new for them. But anyhow, then I introduced hybrid seed corn, and that was a real major improvement for them. And I also introduced them. They used to use sticks to hit the ground and put the seed in, and I was able to go up to Belen there and was able to get some of these I don't know what they call them, but anyhow, you would stick your seed in and you would push it into the ground and move it forward, and it would drop the seed. And then you just go to the next spot and push it in the ground and go forward, and it would drop the seed. So they could plant 4 acres of land that way a day. One person could, versus maybe a fourth of an acre with 5 or 6 guys. So they could plant their fields much faster that way. And so I just try to introduce new methods to them and new equipment and this kind of stuff that they could improve the way that they farmed and this kind of thing. So, or really not farm, is, it's slash and burn there is what it was. So they would grow a crop maybe 1 year on the field, and then they would cut down another area and let that go back up to the jungle, because of the fact that because it was sandy and you couldn't get fertilizer there, so the sand would peter out, or whatever you want to call it, wouldn't grow very well. And also at that location we had a sawmill and a rice mill, so we would clean rice, for them. Anybody that brought rice there, we would clean for them and not charge them. And also, we would build, make lumber, cut trees down and then cut lumber and stuff like that too. I didn't get involved in that too much, but most of my work was in agriculture.
I think it's really interesting to think about how you were coming as a visitor and a guest into that place, but you had a lot to offer in terms of your training and technology methods, like even very physical things like seeds, different types of seeds.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we've talked about hospitality and intercultural places, we talk about how there's a host often, and then there's a guest. But in this unique situation, you're like a guest, but in some ways you're also like a host, because you're helping them find and discover new ways of doing things, and you're helping them have additional resources that they didn't have access to before. So I'm kind of wondering, as you think about your time there, were there things that you felt they gave to you, or that you learned, or I don't know, were there ways in which they served as hosts to you that you really appreciated, where, like, whether it was welcome you to a meal or explaining something about their culture, or how did you feel cared for as a guest when you were there?
Oh, yeah. I think, I worked with them, I guess, is the thing. For instance, when it was time to harvest rice, they harvest their rice with penknives, head by head. And so sometimes I would go out and help them do this, which was kind of weird, because to me, it was so inefficient. But, everything I did, I'd try to think of some other way, that would make things faster for them or easier for them. But I also knew that I couldn't put my values on them. I had to learn from them and do the things the way they did them, rather than the way I would do them sometimes, because that had been their way of doing it for generations, and so they respected me, I think, for that. And they were very hospitable. Every time you walk down the road and stuff like that, they would invite you in for rice or something to eat, and because they took the water and stuff out of the creek where the animals drank, and the animals did this, and they washed their clothes in the same creek. So we boiled all of our water and then put it into a clay jar like things, with things. And it was difficult for them to change that because they had been taking water out of the creek for years and years and years, for all the years they lived. And so for boiling water, it didn't make sense to them. But we tried to tell them that this is one way that you can get rid of some of your illnesses that you have, by having clean water. Excuse me, I guess I need some water. But anyhow, so I had two fellows working for me in the garden, and one of them was a young fellow. He was probably about 25, but he was married. And I kept telling him, it's really important to boil your water, So one day he came to me, he said his wife and him decided they were going to boil their water, and then put it into a cistern like what we had, and take the water out that way. And he said for the first time in his life, he said he didn't feel sick. For the first time in his life, he did not feel sick.
Wow.
And I said, well, will you keep it up? But he was the only person that we ever convinced in all those families that they needed to boil their water. They just thought that did not make any sense because they know that's the way they've done it for all the years that they ever lived. And the average lifespan of a person there and where we served was 45 years. That was the average.
Wow.
So, malaria and all kind of illnesses were that was just the way that was just that part of the country. It was so I wouldn't say it's primitive, but they just didn't know any better because there was only one doctor that we knew about, and he was 45 miles away. The nearest hospital was probably 300 miles away. So without our nurses there, we probably couldn't have helped the people. And they had a lot of snake bites and this kind of stuff that we had to serve. And also, birthing of children and stuff like this that was so different than what they were used to, as far as the way they did it. They didn't have the help, nor did they have the medicine to help them. So I think that was the biggest thing. And the other thing is too, that they told me when I first got there that they're, as after learning to know the people and things that their chickens died. They never seemed to get past, like 6 months or so, and then they would die. And so I wasn't that familiar with chickens, but I went and talked to one of the stations in Berlin, which is a land, as far as experiment station. So I brought back some vaccine for different chicken diseases and stuff. And so another yellow fellow and I did. He was from Colombia, a short little guy. I went around to all these people's houses when they had little chickens, and I would inoculate them, give them this vaccine. And they said, this is a miracle because our chickens aren't dying. And so it's just a case that they had the disease. And the other thing is we'd gotten some Rhode Island red chickens from a Japanese man. And so what I would do is I would trade them eggs. I would trade their eggs. I kept a rooster in with our chickens. And so they'd have these Rhode Island red chickens. We would give them the eggs for them that were fertilized, and then they'd put them underneath their clucks, and we'd take their eggs, So we traded eggs so that this is one way they could get better chickens without having to buy chickens and stuff like that. So, it's just things like that they felt, we were there to help improve there, but, in the normal way of living, really, and, we didn't force them to do anything. And so that was one thing that, that I was able to do that I felt, was a real accomplishment for the people. And, that was I've always got great joy, I think, when I felt like I was doing something to improve their lives, the way they lived, because so.
How long were you there with MCC, and then did you go home anytime during that time?
No.
And then, right,
2.5 years.
Yeah. And then
my parents
you said,
did come down once to visit me. I encouraged them, and they came down and saw what I was doing, and then flew back out. So, but they did come down after I was there for a while, probably about a year. They came down and was there for a week, I believe it was. So
then you said after MCC you were involved with another organization called PAX. Is that right?
Well, PAX was MCC.
Oh, it was
And
MCC.
yeah, this was, I guess it's the Italian word or whatever it is for
Mm-hmm.
peace.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that PAX even operates anymore. It's completely different. Um, but a lot of fellows that served in PAX, they would be maybe in Germany with construction or other countries. So I think probably what we did, us four of us that were in Brazil, probably did more outside the box for PAX. But this is really what PAX was supposed to do, was to know to help the people that were uh, disadvantaged and this kind of thing. So I think a lot of people went. There a lot of PAX guys went to Africa and places like that too. Um, so so that's kind of what PAX was at that time. It was kind of one of the new programs that MCC had started for young men to do alternate service is really what it was kind of set up for.
Mm-hmm.
So
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Then it's very fitting to give it that name.
yeah.
Um, how were you feeling when you realized that your time was winding down, and kind of what were the feelings of the native Brazilians that you were living with for these 2.5 years?
But I was, in a way, I was really wanted to go home because I knew that without more training, I felt like I couldn't serve as much as what I had been, because there were so many things that I felt like if I only knew this or only knew that or had this experience, I could do more for them. So my leaving was kind of a sad time for me, but also, I look forward to getting back home. And at that time when I left, I thought surely I'll return, maybe somehow, some way to Brazil or some other country, um, because I felt like, I mean, not to feel proud of what I did, but I guess I was in a way helping these people and making their life better without changing what they did in a way other than improve what they were already doing. Um, so, excuse me. I think a lot of people have the idea that, you go there and make them become more part of you. And this is one of the things that I don't know whether this was the thought of many people, but when we were in language training down there with all these many missionaries, they all said, why are you doing this? You are just helping the people. You're not saving their souls. You should be out there as pastors. And we still, as Mennonites, we try to meet the people's needs. And I know that Ed, the other PAX fellow, and I, when we were in language training, we went out and helped build a church, as far as they carrying the blocks and this kind of thing. And I was talking to one of the fellows one day about, he says, and he was a Christian, but he was Baptist, I think, by Southern Baptist. And he says, what you people do is helping us. He says, it doesn't do any good if we know the Bible, but we don't have any food to eat. And he said, the people, these Baptist pastors, not to make bad of them, but, he says they come out and give us their Bible and they leave us and we're still as hungry as they were the day they showed up. He says, well, you come out here and you show up and you try to improve what we live. And he said, then we're more receptive to the Bible because now we have full stomachs. So, but a lot of the missionaries felt we were just wasting our time coming there, and they poo-pooed what we were said we were going to do. So it was just a different way of doing things, and so we try to meet the people's needs, not spiritually maybe, but the physical needs. And then the Presbyterian Church, they had a missionary there, and that was part of his job, I guess. But our job, we felt like, was to serve them and make their lives easier for them. So
that makes me wonder, going back to that sign you saw when you first went there about Yankees go home, that part of the building of trust was to show people there that you were interested in their well-being in the long term, not just that you were going to come in and do something quick and then leave, but that you wanted to help them in a deeper sense, and that built trust and relationship. And I just keep coming back to this image of you giving a ride to people in the truck. What a beautiful image of this truck full of people as you're all going to the same place to get things at the market or at the store, and you're helping them in their day, and they're enjoying that help and being with you. And it's a wonderful, hopeful image in my mind of truly being present and helping people. And as you're going somewhere together, maybe for our listeners, they have gotten a sense of your story that it's really important to connect with people where they are, to meet them in their context, like as you did, to work alongside, to eat with, to talk, and to not come in thinking we're going to hold somebody at arm's length or just give them what they need and then leave, but really to hear their story and enter in. And that's a key part of why your time there was so transformative. It seems like you really did that. That's what I'm taking away. And so, Barney, do you have any final questions before we would close our time?
Yeah. So I remember once actually, I think meeting we stopped in Kansas on the way home from Colorado one time. And I guess, was it everyone that Ed and that couple that were there that you met up with? And, did they go back to Brazil or?
Well, Ed, he married this one nurse, nurse's aide, that she was from the Mennonite colonies. The Mennonite colony that they had in Curitiba, you know, during the World War II, was it World War II, I guess? A lot of people left Russia. And so these were Russian Mennonites that they came across on boats and stuff. And because they were from Russia, the United States wouldn't let them in. So Brazil took them in, and they started a Mennonite colony down there in Curitiba. And we visited them at one time, a couple of us did. We went down there to see what kind of things they were doing. And so that's how, they went into that part of Brazil. They also went into Paraguay. So, and that's what these two, well, there was another guy too from that same area that came up and worked with us too. They were from this Curitiba Mennonite colony they were Russian Mennonites that had left Russia during the time. I don't know if you read much about that time when Catherine the Great she heard about Mennonites, and so she knew that they were good people for farmers. And so she made it such that they didn't have to serve in the military. They could have the area there that they lived, and they did a fantastic work as far as farming and this kind of thing. Well, then when Catherine the Great from Russia I guess she would be disposed, then a new Tsar came in, and he said, these Mennonites cannot be here. They're taking up our land, and so he forced them all out. And so a lot of them fled to Germany, and a lot of them fled, and MCC helped a lot of them get out of Russia. And boatloads some went to Canada. They accepted some of these people, and a lot of them went to Brazil, and a lot of them went to Paraguay, and the Chaco of Paraguay. So that's how they got there. And so, they pretty much lived, the Chaco Mennonites lived in Paraguay. They pretty much stayed confined to one area, in the same way with the Mennonites in Curitiba that were also Russian Mennonites. They pretty much stayed, in one large area group, and had their own churches and stuff. So for these people to come up there and work with us was probably something new, even for those Russian Mennonites to work with us and stuff. But we really, really enjoyed them. And the people there are so kind.
That's a powerful story, and it's really encouraging to hear what you was able to be accomplished in that time, and how it was received by the community there, and even the stories that Ron, you still carry with you to this day, and how you came back feeling blessed and happy for that time. And we hope for you, our listeners, that you enjoyed this conversation and learn something new about Brazil and what service opportunities can look like, and maybe even something new about what it means to truly enter into hospitality in an intercultural context. And we want to thank again Ron for serving as a guest today, sharing his story, and also thank you, Barney, as usual, for joining in the conversation and helping lead in this way. And we hope that all of you have a wonderful rest of the week. And until next time, goodbye.